bracing acidity. We're talking, high. I'm not wondering whether this is medium plus plus. This is high acidity. Very palate cleansing, very appealing, actually. It's not, it doesn't shut the flavors of the wine down at all, but the texture is certainly tart. It leans out big time, moving in from the lushness of the nose. I'm gonna immediately, and this is a personal, not trick, but habit. When a structural element like acid, or in the case of red wine, tannin, is aggressive or dramatic, I often go right back to the wine because my body's getting used to that aspect of it. Mid palate, when you're just holding it, there's an illusion of sweetness. There's no actual residual sugar in this wine, but intense fruitiness. So the nose wasn't lying. The acidity is high. I think there's really no phenols to this. What, like some people like to trivialize and call, and I'm not disrespecting it when I say this, white wine tannin, but I don't pick up any of that. Going back to the reflection on what the nose set us up for, there's the citrus, and that actually leads on the palate. So ripe to tart citrus, both lemon and lime. The stone fruit is definitely secondary, but we get some tree fruit, green apple, not tart green apple. Flowers, both fresh and dry. The minerality is very strong on the palate. It just doesn't underline everything. It sort of hugs it. So inorganic earth, big time. Is there oak on this wine? If there is, it is partial and it is completely neutral. This wine is long, it is complex, it is lean and tart, and it's really high quality. And it manages to have very ripe fruit, because the alcohol, which I didn't touch on, forgive me, is medium verging on medium plus, but with high acidity and strong minerality and strong fruit and floral expression. So here we go. Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Grigio, Riesling, other. Please, if you are going, I don't think it's any of these, say so in the chat, because that's wildly interesting to us as well. And looking at these, we've got two highly aromatic varieties, Gewürztraminer and Riesling. The big difference there, Gewürztraminer, torque up the floral component even more to the point of not necessarily attractive perfume sometime, but more importantly, the big difference between Gewürz and Riesling, and keep this in mind, is the mouthfeel. Gewürztraminer has medium acidity, and sometimes can be even deficient depending on where it's grown, and can have actual RS depending on where it's grown. Pinot Gris, Grigio is what we call, I don't like this term, it's not particularly respectful, but somewhat of a neutral grape variety. Or let's just say semi to non-aromatic, right? Much like Chardonnay. Germany, France for old world / Europe options. Some of you are training yourselves to say Europe and non-Europe versus old world, new world. A rose by any other name, we know what we're talking about. And from the New World, Australia and California. Certainly Australia has strong, Riesling expression. Pinot Gris, Grigio is everywhere, but does a great job in France and not so much California, but Oregon and Germany again. Riesling and France, let's not forget Alsace for Gewürz. So do we have 100% yet? Where are we? Everybody, please participate.
5,
Yeah, so
4, 3, 2, 1, vote.
I'm closing the poll, and we were at 81%, which was
Not
very
bad.
decent for a first wine, but we're expecting faster participation from here on. The poll will be put up as Madeline is finishing up the description of the sensory items so that you can start thinking about it. Maddie, while we share the results, I just wanted to throw it out there. From an aromatic standpoint, how do you tell the difference between a Gewürztraminer and a Riesling?
That's a great question. And by the way, there's another aspect I didn't mention because it was secondary to me, but important. And since now all y'all have voted, I learned there are multiple people, all y'all. There is a kiss of TDN. It is not dominant. but it's there. I would say Gewürztraminer has, on the palate, softer is, oh, you're talking just aromatically though. I would say the
Just
the
aromatically.
plurality leads. It is perfume, and it's hard sometimes to get the other stuff out of the way, though certainly, especially from Alsace, you can get minerality on Gewürz. Riesling, it's not just flowers, but you get a touch of TDN, you get that combination of peachy fruit with citrus also. There are more obvious layers, especially in young Riesling, and it's more poignant than Gewürztraminer.
Great. So here are the results. We do have some other. So those who did
Excellent.
put other, if you want to put what other you thought it was, please do so in the chat and we can discuss. And we do have 31% on Germany, 50% on France, and 62% on Riesling. So I think we have the Riesling. So the real question is, as we go through the next
Germany
reveal,
versus France. Pay
yeah,
attention
Germany
to
versus
alcohol
France,
levels. I
and
think that's important. And also the particular expression of aromatics. Alsace, if we're talking France for Riesling, is a warmer growing region. Generally speaking, it's, sun-drenched. Germany really varies, but, on the palate as well, you're going to have significant differences in mouthfeel when it comes to ripeness and weight derived from more alcohol levels than extract, depending on how dry the Riesling is made. Oh, yay. Thank you for saving my aisle seat in business class. And we are going. When I had short legs, I should just give my seats away, but I like the elbow room, right? We are indeed in France. We are in Alsace. We are just east of the Vosges, and you can see those mountains there. And we're at an absolutely A++ producer that's been around since the mid 1600s, Maison Trimbach. This is this view that you're seeing right now gives you just a hint. Go online and look up pictures of Ribeauvillé and Colmar. So Ribeauvillé is, I think, just north of Colmar, but the topography is gorgeous. And I have to tell you, from my own Master Sommelier exam, I remember like it was yesterday, somebody asking me in a British accent, Miss Triffon, please tell me about the rain shadow effect in Alsace. So you have the Vosges Mountains, I swear to God, and I think I got it right, but you have the Vosges Mountains. So you have low rainfall because they're dropping their rainfall before you hit, as it's going over the mountain, but you have winds that make it through. So that helps to maintain the health of the vines coming in from the west. You have 1,800 plus hours of sunshine a year in, this area of Alsace. What is it? O and Ba. I always get confused because O is on the bottom and Ba is on the top, and go figure why the French would do that. But, Primo Alsace vineyards enjoy pushing 2,000 hours of sun per year, and you still get that beautiful acidity maintained. You've got warm days, yes, but you've got cool nights, so that beautiful diurnal shift, preserving and enhancing the acidity, and you are somewhere between 500 and 1,600 feet above sea level. So you've got, altitude as well. Look how beautiful this is. And you are indeed in the foothills of the Vosges. I don't know how high the actual mountains get, but, the vineyards are planted at altitudes, and sometimes, like in Trimbach's case, their Grand Cru vineyards are planted at the top of hills. This is Pierre. And his children are now involved, and actually his I'm looking at this, the origin of this Riesling, high acidity, take me away from warm Alsace, thinking it's got poignant acidity, but it's ripe. There's the punchline, and tons of minerality and a kiss of TDN even in youth. So Alsace is to be considered. And Tim, I'll let you in on this in just a minute, because you can probably speak to it even more eloquently than I am, though I think I'm doing a reasonably good job with this. This is a producer, I've been there, that does everything well from soup to nuts. This is their entry-level Riesling. We're talking free, for price quality relationship. And when I was there, they tasted us on everything from Pinot Gris to Vendage Tardive, though we didn't get SGNs. And everything hit. So, historic and in this case, large, because they're using their own vineyards in addition to long-term contracts. Speaks quality. What to tell you, they like to recommend, if you go to their website, raw fish for sure, Oriental foods for sure, but like most Rieslings, even though this has more elevated acidity certainly than German that has residual sugar like Cabernet or Fine Herb, Trocken Riesling, inches up a little, but it's going to cool heat down and it's going to be wildly useful with a broad range of foods. Takeaway from Alsace for me, for Riesling, is that richness with bracing acidity, the kiss of TDN, the lushness on the nose that's just shocking. And sometimes you get little touches of botrytis that will probably morph as honey or saffron. So more ripe with more elevated alcohol than German. Austrian is now starting to play. I tasted a bunch of them yesterday, and that's a different animal altogether. And I won't confuse the Academy by trying to describe it, but the aroma of Austrian Riesling is very unique and beautiful. This is gorgeous wine. Thank you for selecting it. Evan, anybody, Tim, you're the Riesling expert. Do you want to jump in? Did I leave anything out?
No, I thought that was really thorough. Dipankar had a question. Can you comment on exactly what we're smelling at tasting that classifies as minerality? Okay, so 2 answers to that. First of all, I want you to think about what a wet river stone smells like. And then I want you to think about actually 3 things, freshly turned earth. And then finally, I want you to think about in the summer what it's like when right before a thunderstorm. And 2 things happen.
That's great.
That's a great one.
It's here, especially in New Mexico, where it's really hot. First thing you smell is you smell ozone for the clouds. And then when the rain hits the hot surface, be it pavement or whatever, and interacts with the oils that are on the surface, it's called petrichor. And you get all 3 of those things in this wine. And to Maddie's point, you get a little bit of the petrol, the TDN. And so all of that so that's what we're talking about with earth and mineral. Where's it from? It's from the microbiome of the soil and the yeast population and how that impacts fermentation. Okay.
And by the way, parting shot on this wine, and then I'll let it go, Li-Meng. Soil types are incredibly varied in this area of the world.
Yeah.
And if you go to Trimbach's site, they'll define which punches up the varietal, which brings more richness, but they range from granite to limestone to marl to schist to volcanic soil, so very complex.
I do want to answer the question that is being posed. There are 23% of people who picked Pinot Grigio over Riesling. So I do think that standing up for the people who picked Pinot Grigio, how is it not a Pinot Grigio?
I would say the acidity level, and also the fact that it is so highly aromatic. Whereas Pinot Grigio, it isn't that it's not going to have, layers on the aroma, but it's going to be more sort of subtle tree fruit, apples and pear. The florality will be, significantly more subtle. Again, on the mouthfeel, you're going to get a softer mouthfeel. You're not going to get that raciness. That's the short version to me.
This is me
Going
having a
from first to
6-month
last, too.
hiatus here.
That's okay.
We'll give you all of that. Okay.
There we go. Wine 2.
We'll move on to wine 2. Brilliant, Madeline. As always, I would say that she's one of the hardest people to follow. I know in baseball you want to be number 2 because you expect the first person to always get on base and you just want to knock them around. I find being number 2, you're the kind of person that clears the bases. You lead off with a home run, and then I'm stuck doing that. But brilliantly,
and I vaguely understand what you're talking about, thanks to your tutelage on baseball. Thank you for the compliment.
Anyway, everyone, everything she said, and Tim, thank you for hitting it home. I got nothing, as they were to say, as far as adding goes. So let's take a look at wine 2. Right off the bat, physically, it looks quite different from wine 1. And as you're looking at it against your white background, you'll notice a deeper, richer color right off the bat, which is probably going to speak to a number of different things. It could be an older wine, as white wines do pick up color as they get older. It could be skin contact, which is practiced with certain grape varieties. And if you're at the extreme of that end, you would know them as orange wines these days, with white grapes that practice a lot of skin contact. And it can simply be the variety. Certain varieties are more pigmented than others, or some combination of the above. So here to think about the color, what does it reflect? What is that, as we just said before, is it a winemaking choice? Oak can give you color. Is it a vineyard choice? Is it a climate choice? All those things. If you think about that, aromatics, Madeline led you through a brilliant rainbow of the things we talk about there. I sort of simplify it down to FEW, fruit, earth, and wood is sort of the three core elements I look for in anything that comes out of the ground hits fruit to me. So some people call those herbs, some people call those flowers. Yes, they are, but they're organic materials. So I kind of look at it there. Earthiness is that sort of organic. I love that you've got petrichor in there, Tim. That's so cool. Petrichor is that flavor, but earth components or inorganic nature, or the organic nature, more like compost or potting soil or freshly turned dirt or stuff like that. And then think about the structure and how that is going to be affected here, and how similar or different it is. We've had a very distinctive linear lean structure with the first wine. Does that reflect in the second wine, and what could that mean about them? So we talked a little bit about that. It is a deeper color. As I swirl it around here, it has more viscosity, richness of texture, depth. Think about if Madeline's wine was somewhere in the 2% milk category, this one's probably more like full milk, pushing half and half as far as texture and how it comes down. The tears are a little bit fatter, but still don't move super duper fast. So again, just things here. I don't overthink that beyond the color and all that, but it's just good to know. Mostly we're going to spend time in the nose here. And what I'm picking right off the bat is a wine. You know what I'm going to describe it as? Is there some similarities between these two wines in terms of, fruit character and stuff like that. But while the wine that Madeline had was an extremely lean, extremely precise, extremely sharp wine, this is like, for those people that are photography fans, that was a glossy print. This is a matte print, right? So all of those elements are there, but maybe without all of the harder edges and lean edges that you have there. So I get citrus, I get lemon, I get even a little bit of Meyer lemon or something, but they're slightly riper and slightly less hard, less pronounced. No pith, no zest in this. It's really about the fruit. There's tree fruit here, a little bit of apple, yellow and green. There's a little bit of pear as well too, somewhere between yellow and green, and again ripe but not overripe, and maybe even a little kiss of underripe on a yellow pear if you want to get very, very specific. There's green plum, particularly. There's a little bit of star fruit. There's a little bit of florality here, very white blossoms, but not super pronounced, certainly not as again, the term that we talk about oftentimes with florals is sort of the terpenes in the wine, and a wine being terpenic versus not. Gewürztraminer, for those people who've had them before, are full of terpenes. A lot of that really floral, sweet, spicy floral kind of note there. This wine, maybe not so much. As far as herbs goes, maybe a little bit of chai flower, a little bit of lemongrass, a little bit of ginger powder, white tea. And then there's this interesting thing. Tim has described it in the past as being sort of like a pine nut, peanut shell thing, which I would suggest might suggest Lee's contact there, but it's definitely a little bit of that element there. Maybe a little bit of good Pilsner beer, Lee's or something like that. And then in the palate, okay, this is a lean wine. However, not as lean as the first wine is. So it has some glycerin, it has some gras, as the French would call it, or fatness. I wouldn't put it as far as going oily, but nevertheless, there's some weight to the wine. The acidity level is pronounced, but appropriate. I wouldn't, it's not electric. It's not ripping the tartar off of my teeth sort of thing, closer to the wine one, but it's definitely pronounced and it's there. I'd probably call it medium plus acidity. I'd probably call it medium alcohol. I'm not getting a lot of oak in this wine. So if there is oak there, it's either larger format or older, or perhaps blended out, even in larger or older format with some stainless steel or something like that. It's surprisingly long. I'm still tasting it there. High quality and a very different profile. So I think you can see there is a lot of similarity to wine one, but it's really different than wine one too. So let's see what our choices are here as we kind of move through that. We always hit the polling and like to give our brains a little workout, particularly Li Meng, this is for you. If you don't have the wines, we'll pay attention to what's going on in the polling. And your choices are as follows: Chenin Blanc, which is a grape that we denote or connote associately with the Loire Valley. In the Anjou-Saumur region, we associate it with South Africa all over the place. They've got a lot of Chenin Blanc there, bits and pieces in California and things like that. And it's really driven by this combination of sort of appleiness, chalkiness, particularly in the dry versions, a little bit of tropicality. I like to call it juicy fruit gum character for those of you who are gum chewers, and maybe a little bit of ripe, oftentimes bordering on the pie side of apples and stuff like that. You have Garganega, which is not a God bless you. Garganega, God bless you. But it is the grape that we find and associate with Soave. Thank you for smiling, Madeline. And it's usually 100%, although it can be blended a little bit too with some local varieties. But it's a wine that has texture. It's what I would call, again, probably in that semi-aromatic vein, not as expressive as the Gewürztraminer, but not as relatively more neutral in nature or non-aromatic as Chardonnay or Pinot Gris would be. Rhone wine blend would be the Marsanne, Roussanne, Picpoul, all those grapes down in the south. Probably not Viognier, which would stand off as being, again, very aromatic in nature. So if that, or if there's another, think about what it could be. By the way, vote, vote, vote. It's all anonymous. Nobody's going to know who you are. And if you make a mistake, good on you. It's great because mistakes are good for learning. I used to remind my children of that every single day. And then the Europe, non-Europe opportunities to match there. You can see what they are. Italy would certainly be Garganega, probably more so than anything. France would be Rhone Blend and Chenin Blanc. South Africa, of course, would be Chenin Blanc, and California, a little bit of all of the above. And yes, I believe there's a producer or two doing Garganega these days. So anyway.
Just one thing to let me get in on how to find the poll. There was a question earlier. I hope this person found the poll. If you look around your screen, you might have to close some windows and things like that. It's probably tucked in and hidden somewhere. It comes up automatically. If you have trouble with it, you can also probably look at the view that says having the speakers and the presentation side by side. It might help you pull up the poll. So if you're having trouble with that, the last resort is to exit the webinar and come back in. And when it comes back in fresh, your whole thing is reset again and you'll be able to see the poll. So sorry about the interruption.
No worries. Vote by clicking, not drawing on your poll. Like I used to, my default is to grab for a pencil. All right. So that said, you're all thinking. I hope you're voting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Pretty
Lock.
good.
Remember, it's anonymous.
I don't think I've seen 96%
There you go.
participation.
Look at that. That's my enthusiastic push. And the fact that everyone now knows, again, it is anonymous. So it's interesting here. We have sort of a push back and forth between Chenin Blanc and Garganega. And obviously Italy and France sort of driving there. A little bit of South Africa, probably on the Chenin back and forth between the French. Nobody's really in California. So what would I say quickly before we find out where we're going? Chenin Blanc, I would suggest to you, even in a slightly warmer year, and this, when we learn about what it is, I'll tell you is a little bit of a warmer year in this part of the world, would generally hold its acid better than this. This wine has got nice medium plus acid, but it's more, it's a softer kind of feel. Chenin Blanc almost always is still more like what you would find in wine one. You have that kind of bright, bitey electric acid. And that would probably be my biggest clue. It's not as neutral, and the wines from the Rhone style would be much more alcoholic than this. They'd have more body, more richness. So that's what you're getting there. So we are leaving our good friends Jean and Pierre Trimbach and saying, we miss Hubert Trimbach. I loved Hubert Trimbach. He was one of my best pals.
What a great ambassador for Alsace.
Yeah, and we're going and we're leaving, but this is probably like a Ryanair kind of flight. You know, I don't know what the equivalent of Ryanair in Italy is, but it's a relatively short flight. So we are not taking the train down to the Loire Valley to go to Chenin Blanc land, but we are going to the Veneto, and we are specifically going to the heartland, Classico, the heartland of Soave. Soave being one of the great appellations of the Veneto, along with the Valpolicella area, where they also make Amarone. You also have Prosecco coming from this area. This is a very prolific area, but we're focusing on dry white wines made 100%, as you will see soon, from the Garganega label. Now, I did bring up that this is a Classico wine, and Classico, as you're going to see in many parts of Italy, simply refers to the so-called oldest or heart of the region. It's not classic like it's better. It simply refers to the traditional area or the core area, which in the case of Soave are the hillside wines and not the flatlands down at the bottom by the village, which were used to plant up when Soave was on fire back in the days of Frank Sinatra and Bola and all that stuff. Now production sort of slimmed down and focuses in on the mountains and on the hillsides. And this particular one from Suavia, Suavia is high up in Classico. It's located, they have sort of three colors of soils up here. You have sort of blonde soils, you have black soils from which this you come from. You can maybe even tell a little bit, but these are sort of the black volcanic soils, and their core vineyard is one called Carbonare, which sounds like carbon, and pasta, and that's carbonara, right? And all that other stuff. And then you have red soils as well on the far eastern side of the mountain. All of them are degraded volcanic material. These are the three ladies of Tassaris, and mom helps too. Dad is the only one who's a male there, and he's pretty quiet. I could understand why. His daughters and wife are excelling, and he's just one. So this is a completely female-run operation. They do an amazing job. One does marketing, one does winemaking, one's in the vineyard. Mom helps all around, keeping everybody going, and dad is quiet, as it should be. This has been family owned since the 1800s. They are now in their 11th generation. The area where they at, primarily this Carbonari area, is one of 60 different crews that sit up on the hillside. For those of you who want to learn more, this would be the equivalent of single vineyard wines, of classic German wines, Sori is in Piedmont, but they are very special areas. This wine is 100% Garganega, as we saw before. It comes from the 2022 vintage, which was it was certainly not 19 and 20, but it was a little bit riper. And because of that, the wine is a little bit fleshier, because usually these wines come from the hillside, although the ones from the black soils tend to be, dare I say, the oiliest by texture, so that would kind of make sense in the nature of it. It's still bright, it still has good architecture to it, and it shows really well. If you haven't had Garganega before, this is a good one to pin your hat on, just to recognize it and understand it. I promise all of you who are sitting there quaking in your boots right now that you'll never get this on an exam, but it is a classic wine of the world and one from which you should be familiar. Their even more focused cru wine called Carbonare, Monte Carbonare, is even more tighter on the lens than this one, but this is a great example of a well-made Soave Classico.
I want to riff on your Frank Sinatra comment real quick, because it took
Uh-huh.
me a minute to understand what you were saying, but what happened,
Bola.
I mean, it's extraordinary. Yeah, Bola. This is a category that went from as commercial and as sort of, simple as you can get to artisan. I mean, really, if Suave is not on your radar, make it a mission in life. And especially the mouthfeel is so friendly with or without food. It's really special. And I love that you had put Roussan and Marsanne blend as an option, because they share a little bit of that characteristic.
Yeah.
Neither of those categories are wildly aromatic, but there's a roundness. But quality Suave is as good as anything out there. Oh, and somebody mentioned Genie.
Yeah.
And Inama,
Genie
was that,
and
yeah,
Pierpont.
and Inama.
Just let me jump in with a couple of questions to make sure they're answered. Ivan asked, is it true that Suave has volcanic soils? Evan did say that, but can you expand a little bit about the volcanic soils?
Yeah, well, volcanic soils, which are generally going to give you grit. So if you find yourself to have a little bit of a pull here, it is not actually heavy duty skin contact, although there is a tiny bit of skin contact on that wine. But volcanic wines have a grittiness to them. Our good friend, mutual friend, John Zabo, master sommelier out of Canada, wrote an entire book on volcanic soils, going through them around the world. Suave is certainly one of the leading areas, along with places in Greece, places in Spain, etc., that have volcanic wines, but you would notice them by the grit. What you get here in spades, which none of the other areas have, is three different types and colors of volcanic soil at the same time, and sort of this more golden blonde color, this black color, and the red color. And they're not flavor-wise that differential, They're more texturally differential than anything else, and I find the ones from the black soils to be the most interesting and the most fully textured. The red ones have that sort of ferrous iron character to them, which gives them a little bit more structure and leanness. And the ones that are more blonde soils, as you can imagine, are kind of the roundest and easiest to drink within that particular hillside. But the last note on this Frank Sinatra thing, and then we'll move it over to Tim, is Frank Sinatra has been known during that period of time to have said if he'd show up to do a show, his dressing room beverage of choice was Bola Suave. And if it was no Bola, no Frank, and he wouldn't go on. It's crazy.
Yeah, don't forget the Jack
Question
Daniels
before
too.
before we go to Tim, we have to answer another question.
Yep.
Tapanka says, my notes say to look for white pepper in Garganega. Is this correct?
No,
No.
no, you don't find, and there's no Rotundon in Garganega as a variety. Any spiciness you may get, maybe soil related at some point, or soil, and there is some lees contact here, and we sort of talked a little bit about that in the peanut shell or the cashewy macadamia character that's there. But no, there's no Rotundon in Garganega, Tim, unless I'm missing something.
No, but that's funny. You bring up an interesting point, and that to me, and this is just me. So the texture of volcanic wines to me is like the texture, the taste of white pepper without the flavor. It's the same grainy,
Yeah, it's a grit.
gritty texture, but there's no white pepper. No. Okay. All right. Now for something completely different. All right. Everybody, let's go to wine number 3. And we're going to use the visual aids. So first, the questions. What does the wine's color suggest about its age and winemaking techniques? Everybody, take a look at wine number 3 in the context of the other 2 white wines. It's the lightest in color. And what does that mean? We'll find out. And then what are the most important non-fruit aromas and flavors in the wine? That's important for this wine. And then how does the wine structure, and here I'm talking alcohol and then the acid level, reflect the climate of where the grapes are grown? Okay, with that, we're going to take a look at the site. To do that, we'll use a white background. And we'll once again notice that this is straw colored instead of yellow. Like the first 2 wines, it is clear, it is bright, it reflects a lot of light. What else about it? The legs, tears, Marangoni effect, just a solid medium. They set up pretty quickly and they come down. Yeah, so the alcohol in this is going to be in the 13 range, so not a lot. Okay, on the nose, the main event. We're going to start with, there's a lot going on. We're going to start with the fruit. In fact, this covers, I think, almost all the fruit categories with maybe the exception of one. So citrus fruit. There is some sweet and sour citrus here. There is some Meyer lemon. There's also regular lemon and some lime. And fresh and ripe. And here we're talking the peel and then the flesh of all those. In terms of the orchard fruit, which is a fancy way of saying apple and pear, this is like green apple. And maybe somewhere in the middle, there's gooseberry here. Really tart gooseberry. I mean, it's really bright. It snaps. And here, these are fresh and tart. Stone fruit is white, maybe some white plum, white nectarine, and again, fresh and just barely ripe, maybe underripe. Tropical fruit, there's kiwi, a little underripe mango, and definitely some underripe pineapple. And again, these are all fresh. And yeah, so the only thing that's missing is really something in the melon universe, and there's really nothing there. In terms of flowers, if you smell the wine, pull your nose out of the glass, couple of things going on. This smells like elderflower and pretty strongly of fresh apple blossoms, maybe even citrus blossoms too. Now, the main event though is the non-fruit here, aside from the flowers, and that's everything in the green botanical type universe. So there's a ton of things going on for herb and vegetal, right? There's all sorts of green peppers. There's jalapeno, there's green bell pepper. There's also lemongrass, there's verbena, there's chives, there's basil, and it's like freshly mown lawn. So it's really herbal and vegetal at the same time. And what else? Am I missing anything? Maybe a little chamomile in there. Fresh chamomile, not dried. In terms of earth and mineral, no earth. Definitely a hint of minerality. And by the way, if you're asking yourself, okay, is there mineral? You have 2 wines that have screaming minerality, both of them, wines 1 and 2. So go back and check out either one of them, especially the Riesling wine. Go back, revisit it just for a moment. Oh yeah, okay. So this wine, by comparison, wine number 3 has un poquito, as we say here in New Mexico, some, but not a lot. There's a notable absence of wood, but there is, and Evan alluded to this earlier, there's kind of like peanut shells, almost Pilsner-like. So there's something in that realm, and that speaks to Lee's contact. Yeah, so that was used. And for me, there's really no detectable wood. All right, so let's taste it. All right, not a very shy wine. It is dry. We'll do the structure first. So the alcohol is medium, 30.5%, not higher than that. The acid is medium plus, it's not high. If you need a reality check, go back and taste Maddie's Riesling. It's like shocking. I can feel the Riesling, for minutes after in the enamel of my front teeth. Okay, so medium plus. There are some phenolics here. It's low, but they are there. Little grittiness in the finish. In terms of confirming all that fruit, yeah, it's all there. I would say maybe more the green apple there. There's still kiwi, there's gooseberry, there's underripe pineapple. Everything turns more sour. What else? Maybe not as much Meyer lemon, it's regular lemon and lime. And white, I didn't mention yellow grapefruit, but that really comes through. And it's all
white,
fresh
yellow
and
grapefruit.
yeah, fresh, ripe, and tart. Yep. Okay. Tropical fruit, yeah, but not as much. What else? But the pepper thing, the jalapeno, the green bell peppers, verbena, lemongrass, even a little bay laurel, and then mown lawn, the whole 9 yards. It's there. A little bit more mineral in the mid palate between, and then when I say that, that's literally the sequence of experience between fruit and acid, and it's in the middle, right? And for me, it's the roof of my mouth too. But again, if it's little, it's not much. And if you go back and taste either the Suave or the Riesling, they're just like way higher on the mineral scale. Okay. One thing that's curious to me is that there's a rounded texture here. So the wine's not really sharp and etched and precise in terms of the fruit on the palate. I suspect maybe some used wood was part of the winemaking regime. So not all completely, but I think a little bit was used. Finish is medium plus, complexity medium plus, and really, as they say in baseball, we've been teed up with a fastball right over the plate. Okay, with that, let's see our choices so we can vote. And the poll says,
I'm getting also, Tim, as we're waiting for the poll to pop up here, just this, maybe it's just me, and maybe it's just because I just came back from Vietnam about a week ago, screaming passion fruit.
Oh, wow. Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
Good call. All right, so we've got Alvarinho, the Spain, Portugal combination of the same grape. Okay. We've got Sauvignon Blanc and/or blend, and then we've got Chardonnay. So your region choices here are Spain, obviously, for the Alvarinho, France for the Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay, and then New Zealand for all of those, because I think maybe not Alvarinho. Okay. And then Chile for the Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. So everybody vote early, vote only once. And
So Tim, did you get the effervescence?
no, I didn't have any in my glass. I just saw Juan's comment. And who knows, that may just be your particular bottle. That's usually some dissolved CO2 that's left over from bottling. Sometimes winemakers will add CO2 as a preservative, before they bottle, and that shows up in bubbles in the bottle.
Yeah,
Tim, can you go back to the neutral oak thing? Like when you pick up a little bit, how are you picking it up? You're picking it up from mouthfeel or flavor?
Mouthfeel. Yeah.
Like a broader, more expanded mouthfeel.
Well,
and
yeah, you think about I think about stainless steel wines, and they're they're very linear, and this, on the other hand, the edges are literally the edges of my mouth. It's more rounded and it's more gentle. However, the varietal stamp of the wine is kind of like being stuck in an elevator with somebody on the phone who's talking too loud.
I just stopped the poll because I'll tell you, it's at 96% and people are confident. We're at like a 77% Sauvignon Blanc here. So for the 20% who did not pick Sauvignon Blanc, do you want to help differentiate between the Sauvignon Blanc and Alvarinho?
Yeah. In fact, we're going to answer, who is it, Mikey, your why not Grüne Veltliner, mainly because the whole pepper thing was missing and it would have higher phenolics, this, on the other hand, was, you know, in terms of the herb vegetal thing, and it's different from Gruner, because Gruner is, I call it green botanicals. So that's things like daikons and radishes and lentils,
Savory.
parsley, and yeah, and this is none of those are here. So this is, and so Christine says, why not Albarino? It's because this grape, and let's just call it what it is. This is Sauvignon Blanc. It's just so herbal and vegetal, and Albarino doesn't have any of those things. It could be slightly botanical, but it's all about, you know, as our good friend Keith Goldstein, MS, says, it's like Viognier nose and Riesling palate. So it's very floral, very peachy, sweet citrus and lees and mineral, and then, you know, phenolic bitterness and high acid. Okay. All right. So let's what else do we need to say?
As we reveal it, Tim, if you could talk about New Zealand versus France and Chile, because people seem very confident about the variety, but when it comes to the region, there was a bit of, you know, sort of 47% New Zealand, but then split pretty even between Chile and France.
Yeah, good point, Li Mei. And I'll talk about you know, Loire Valley, but then I'm going to hand it to Evan and talk about Chile. He knows a lot more about that than I do. So, you know, Sancerre, Puy-Fumé, Cancy-Rouy, all of those satellites, and in the Central Vineyards, you know, really mineral-driven wine. You know, limestone, silex-driven wines, high acid. You know, the pyrazine thing is there. It's a mark, but the fruit is literally not this ripe. And this, I have to say, this is, and we'll talk about this winery. I mean, this is Huia from New Zealand, and you know, it's a different style. So they use indigenous yeast. They use partial neutral barrel fermentation, which softens the edges of the wines, and long cool fermentation. But yeah, it's a different style of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. But to me, at the same time, I really can't go too many other places with it. I can't go to Sancerre. There's not enough mineral. Acid's not high enough, and it's got a ton of fruit, and it's really vegetal. That jalapeno to me is New Zealand. It really is. Gooseberry, yeah. Marshall's saying, yeah. Green bell pepper in my fridge for 3 months came handy.
Yeah.
Kevin,
and just to quickly give you 2 cents on the Chilean thing before you give us the master class here on Huia. 2 things. One, the areas where you find Sauvignon Blanc are primarily going to be in Casablanca and Greater Aconcagua, which goes from the coast all the way pushing into the Andes. And as you move further away from the coast to the middle area, which is where 80% of it's made, tends to be quite warm, and therefore it tends to be very grapefruity in nature. It's sort of the driving flavor down there. There's a little bit of green there, but it's only when you get to coastal Sauvignon Blanc that it gets very, very green. And even then, you would still have a bit more body and weight than you would in New Zealand. It just gets riper there. As you get further inland, it gets even more pink grapefruity, et cetera. And then the other thing to worry about with Sauvignon Blanc from Chile, there's still a lot of what they call Sauvignon Nas or Sauvignon Vert out there. And that smells like a combination of green onions and underarm. It's kind of weird. You'll know it when you get it. And they're trying to mitigate the amount of usage there, but they oftentimes blend it out with Sauvignon Blanc, particularly in the bigger volume wines that are there. And if you ever get that, that is a bird dog to Chile.
Do they use oak or no?
In Chile? It depends on the producer, very much like New Zealand that Tim will talk about. You know, there are some people like, cloudy-based Tecoco or things like that that are these very Gravian driven. They're trying to be like white Bordeaux styles, but in general, there are not that many people. There's not that many people doing it in New Zealand, and even fewer doing it in Chile.
And you can get the green pepper, but just more on the coast in New Zealand. So green pepper is not unique to New Zealand. You can get the green pepper in Chile, not just only in New Zealand wines, but in Chile it would be closer to the coast.
Yeah, you would be in what they would call like Casablanca Costa or things like that, things that were literally adjacent to the water, and they tend to be that way. And even a lot of like parsley and stuff like that too.
Yeah, so underarm, Evan, I'm going to quote you on that. Don't worry. That's a new one to me. Okay, so this is Huia in Awatari Valley, one of the 3 big subregions of Marlborough. And this is Mike and Claire Allen. The winery's founded in 1996. They're both Roseworthy College graduates, and that's the most important, enology school in Australia. Oddly enough, they both went to work in Champagne at different places. Claire went to Tétanger And Mike went to work for Veuve Clicquot. They came back, they started the winery. They make really good sparkling wines, classic method sparkling wines. In fact, my favorite New Zealand sparkling wines are Huyas. They also make some Pinot Noir, but other white grapes like Chardonnay, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Riesling, and then this Sauvignon Blanc. And again, they're one of the big proponents for sustainable agriculture in Awatari Valley. This again is indigenous yeast and small batch fermentation, some of it in neutral barrels, 500-liter barrels, and on the lees for about 6 months, and then bottled without fining. So I think it's a very distinct style for New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and definitely not your commercial style. And I think very unique and delicious. So my colleagues, any thoughts about this?
I'm curious if Huya, do you know if it means anything? Sorry to put you on the spot, or is it
Is it Maori? I really don't know.
Maori? It might be.
I don't know.
I just think too,
Yeah,
you know,
we
from a
should
very
ask Queen
simple, really simple aspect, you know, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc to me, like Tim said, I mean, it's a powerhouse on the nose, and the combination of fruit and green is just, it whips your head back. And also I find that there's a fruit, sweetness to the fruit as well. I think that, you know, don't agonize too much over, is this old world? It's not. You know, and the lack of, you know, I mean, there's minerality in there, but you really have to wait a minute or two before any of it manifests.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're going to wrestle with anything, it's not going to be Upper Loire.
Yeah, really
It's
quick.
good. It's really good.
Yeah. Jerry is asking what gives away least contact in this wine. Jerry, there's two things really. And this wine, I mean, the pyrazines are screaming. They're really grabbing your attention, but there's, as Evan calls it in the Suave, there's a peanut shell Pilsner type aroma to it that's secondary. But then on the palate, there's the creaminess in the mid palate. And that is least contact. I mean, that's why you do it. You're adding texture and some complexity to a white wine. Okay, are we ready for wine number 4? And now it's for something ecumenically, monumentally different. So the first of the 3 red wines, and everybody, let's do our little color check. So taking a piece of white paper, we're going to hold it up, and goodness gracious, you can't see through it. It's opaque, right? That too. So we're going to call this, whatever color it is, it's opaque. And I'm going to call it opaque ruby purple, right? Very dense color. The edge lightens up to like a fuchsia magenta type rim, if we want to go there. But a really dense color, and the color really holds to the edge. So it's fairly young, whatever it is. And again, if you take a look at this first question, what does the wine's depth of color suggest about the possible grape variety? Well, we're not in the Pinot Noir universe for sure. We're in a universe of thicker skin, deeper pigmented grape varieties. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then once again, I'm asking you, what are the important non-fruit aromas and flavors always? And then how would you describe the texture and quality of the tannins in the wine? Because that's really going to be something that will help you decide what the wine could be made from in terms of the grape. Okay, on the nose. It's just like a buffer of alcohol. Okay, so, you know, deep color to me usually means really ripe grapes, warm climate, and that's holding true here. So I've got quite a bit of fruit, but it is all ripe, stewed, dried, cooked, even raisinated. So we'll start with the red fruit. It's like craisins. It's like the fruit roll-ups or the craisins you give your kids in a school lunch. And maybe some dried red plum bordering on prune. There's darker fruit too, but again, it's really ripe. It is like, you know, I would say black plums again. What else? Blackberries, black cherries, maybe some kisses, and it's all ripe, overripe, almost dried and raisinated. But again, it's connecting the dots to how the alcohol level presents itself on the nose, which is like an assault, okay? But what else? There's some dried floral above the glass. It's kind of like lavender and maybe even some potpourri. And then there's other non-fruit things. There's kind of leafy greens, I would say. There's mushrooms, there's sun-dried tomatoes. What else? There's a little bit of kola nut, which could be the oak, as opposed to the grape. And then there's some like tobacco, brown tobacco leaves, and there's some bergamot, like Earl Grey tea. And then it's like chicory. right? So something really strong and aromatic, some black licorice and some peppercorn. Yeah, and even paprika. And again, it's always ripe and the nose is really powerful here. There is definitely earth and mineral here. There's like dried baked soil, almost like terracotta, and then there's mineral. On top of that, there's some oak, definitely some oak here, some smaller oak. I know that there's some vanilla, but it's more in the presence of dark spices and some vanilla. There's smokiness, toastiness, and there's some walnutty oxidation that you would expect from oak, and also a wine with this level of ripeness. Okay, let's taste it and see what happens. I'm really curious. You've got a really big wine like this. The winemaking's got to be good because grapes this ripe, it's like frat party wants to get out of control, right? So the winemaking's got to good, especially with the tannin management. So that's what I'm curious to see. Okay, that's good winemaking. That's really good winemaking. Okay. My goodness, there's alcohol. Okay, so on the palate, the wine's full body. The alcohol's high. This is 15% easily, maybe 15.5. Interestingly enough, and here we're talking probably about the grape variety. Notice the acid, because you've got high alcohol and the acid's medium plus at least, so it's popping. It really keeps the wine from being cloying and heavy and ponderous and linebacker-like, if I can use that expression. The tannins, though, are medium plus. And I expected, full on, monster truck pull, something like that. The finish is long, complexity is medium plus, headed towards high. All those things, it's funny because the fruit is still raisinated, very overripe, but there's a lot of tart fruit as well. Interesting, and I think that's the grape again. Very earthy, profoundly earthy. And then all those things, the bergamot tea, the chicory, tobacco, all those things. So really complex wine. And some black pepper too in the finish. Okay, so here we are. Your choices are Cabernet Sauvignon and blend, Grenache and blend, or Mourvedre. And your place choices are geographical choices: Spain, of course. That would be for Grenache or Grenache or Mourvedre, possibly for Cabernet. There's some in the Penedès. France, definitely for Mourvedre and Grenache and Cabernet. In Chile for Cabernet, possibly Grenache, and then Oregon for, I don't know, Mourvedre maybe. Okay, so everybody vote now.
The first red wine is always a little tough to get participation. Come on,
this,
guys.
This one
It's
is
anonymous.
a reality check.
No, go. You know what? I just think the nose is glorious. And I mean, I'm speaking up only because it just absolutely whipped my head back with, I mean, alcohol, yes, but there's other things that are inextricably linked or, melted into the alcohol that, like you described it so beautifully, that right to me, verging on candied fruit and
two quick
spice.
ads. One, I want people to think about a wave. I'll explain it to you in the happy half hour. But there's a methodology to the madness of sequencing in this particular place. And the other thing I would tell you is, why do you need Amarone when you can have this? Italy was not an option.
Yeah, the fraction of the price. Okay, so everybody, let me see. Judy, thanks for looking up the meaning of Huya. We appreciate that. Okay, so here we are. People are in the Cabernet camp, a few Grenache blend, a lot of people in Mourvedre camp. Okay, and we've got Spain, France, and Chile. So,
and you've got an interesting comment here, Tim. Kevin says this could be a dessert.
Yeah, Kevin. You know what this would work with? Something with chocolate and like sea salt, fleur de sel. It would be killer with it. Really good. Akeem, actually, Amarone first on your list. Okay, I'll talk about that in a second, but let's see what it is. Let's get on Evan's Learjet. And where are we going this time? We've got a long way to go, and we're going to probably have to make a stop. And maybe we'll stop in Mumbai. And yeah, but we are going back to Europe. And I know Kevin is on this call from Santa Fe. And Kevin, imagine a place that looks like when you drive from Santa Fe to Chimayo, and you go through and you're about to go down into the valley of Chimayo. And everybody, you should see this because it's absolutely gorgeous, but it's like a moonscape with rocks. And we're going to a place that kind of looks like that. We're going to Murcia in southeastern Spain in Jumilla. And this is Bodegas Juan Gil. The Gil family, I mean, this winery in particular was founded in 1960. And obviously, what's crazy about today's tasting, I've been to two places. So I've been to this place and I've been to one of the other wineries. I won't tell you which one. So I was here in Jumilla quite a few years ago. What's crazy is that here we're talking about Monastrell. So Mourvedre, but Mourvedre is a Spanish grape, just like Garnacha is Spanish and not French. So here we're talking about 50 to 60-year-old Monastrell vines. And the crazy thing is that they are planted on their own rootstock. They are not grafted because it is such an inhospitable climate, just like parts of New Mexico, for grapes to grow. It is so dry. And phylloxera as a bug has 6 stages of its life cycle, and 3 are above ground. And so if it actually shows up here and it gets above ground, it dies because there's no water, the intense sunlight, and the heat of everything. So these are gnarly 50-plus-year-old Monastrell vines, and on their own rootstocks, everything here is done by hand. What else can we say about it? Plant harvested, everything done by hand. Small batch fermentation, open top fermenters. And then, 12 months aging in mixed of used and new French oak. I will say this is one that has been a long time one of my favorite red wine values. So if you need a wine to go with barbecue or something really intensely flavored, this is your wine because it's such a good wine. This is one of 3 Monastrell or blends that the family, this particular state makes. And this one, can we show the price? Because it's pretty cool,
Yeah.
Tim, it's so exciting. I've been there too. And I just remember this was before irrigation was allowed at all, any.
Yeah.
And I mean, how the yields had to be pathetic, and there was like a meter of rocks before they hit anything else. But what's amazing is that it's got definition even with all that power. It doesn't come off muddy. Why Monastrell? I'm curious, as opposed to other powerful reds. What is your signature for it?
Okay, so my signature for this is such a savory red wine. In fact, I call Bandol pot roast in a glass. But also, everybody now, once you've tasted this 2 or 3 or 4 times, notice the bitterness on the finish. And that to me is Mourvedre or Monastrell, but also all the savory components to it. And I think about, other wines that might get to this level of alcohol and they are not as tightly knit. They
lose their shape.
Yeah.
But Tim, with the dried fruitness, does that give a bit more credence to the folks who went Amarone?
Well, it does, except for the fact that, the acid for Amarone is probably a little bit higher. The wine's also really floral. And, sometimes, some of the producers, botrytis is still a factor. And for me, volatile acidity is one of the main markers for Amarone.
Right. An actual RS.
An actual RS. And neither of them, they're not here.
Tim, I'm staying on this picture. Just one thought on this vines, the actual original vines. Is that why it's so close to the ground? This is close to the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in fact, the pictures I have, there's Bartolome Abelan, the winemaker. The pictures I have from that trip, they're basically like these sprawls of vines that are sitting right on the rocks on the ground. And they're really difficult to work. So
interesting.
Yeah. Labor will become an issue over time in this part of the world because everything has to be hand harvested and costs and everything. People are rethinking it. Actually, if you go to another place, just quickly as a complete segue, if you go to Châteauneuf-du-Pape, many of you know the pictures of the grapes grown in the galets, the sort of rolled pebbles, as they like to call them, which are all done traditional guillot, low to the ground and all that. They're actually training a lot of vineyards up onto wires to get them off the ground to figure out in time if you can have something that looks like a moon rover, because you got to go through the stones, pick the grapes by machine because they can't find anyone to come and pick the grapes.
I'm sorry, Tim, there is one more question here.
That was a good one, right?
Why not Grenache blend from Southern Rhone? And Ivan says this is a tricky one.
Ivan, true, if you haven't tasted this, but I think once you've tasted this once or twice, you'll nail it. It's very distinct. And then why not a Grenache blend? To me, what's missing? There's some things missing. First of all, Grenache is going to give you red fruit predominantly, like strawberry jam. It's like strawberry jam and pepper and savory and bay leaf and things like that. If those things aren't here, and Grenache blend's rarely going to give you this much color, unless, of course, there's a lot of Syrah in it. But that's how I would differentiate in it. Yeah, and also, that bitterness that I'm talking about in finish, that's not Grenache at all.
Yeah.
I get it. And speaking of bitterness, I think about Bandol, Domaine Tempier, and Ott, and places like that. You really get a reductive quality and the bitterness together on those wines. Yeah.
All right. And by the way, just one last thing. We're moving on, and I'm going to save some time for you, Madeline. I don't want you sprinting through the last wine. The grape is from Spain. It migrated to Bandol, right? This grape is Spanish first, and then it went out. Grenache was Spanish first, and then it went out. Many of these grapes in the world that we think of were indeed Iberian before that were there. So quickly, take a look at this wine. Once again, the color is perhaps a little bit more deeper and more purpley, if you will, than the last wine we had. In fact, the outside rim is a sort of vibrant, almost magenta color to it. It is verging on the dark to opaque, depending on how much you can see through it, how good your eyes are, I would say. And let's jump right into the nose and our fruit, earth, wood thing. This is a nice combination of a lot of fruit and definitely some elements of earth, or wood rather, but not a lot of earth. So let's take them there first. Right off the bat, I wouldn't call this per se a fruit bomb, but it is ample with fruit, and it's both red and black fruit, and it's a combination of plums, red and black, berries, red and black, and just whatever you want to call them. There's raspberries, black and red. There's blackberries. There's strawberries. There's also black and red plums. There's black and red cherries. There's a lot of stuff going on, and very much like the wine that we just came off of, it is still quite ripe and bright. It's not what I would call per se baked at all or raisinated. It's not dried, but some of the fruit in there is definitely a little bit more jammy, i.e., like pie fruit, than it would be confected or anything like that. Next up, there's just a kiss of orange or orange rind in there, kind of like those Dutch chocolate orange segments that you can get that have got the chocolate and the orange together, that little thing. And then there's this interesting character of sort of greenness to it. And while there's an element of sort of like something spicy, maybe like arugula in there, it's really more about the mint. It's really more about the herb, a little bit about anise seed, a little bit of tea leaf, and then an interesting thing that's kind of exotic, more like five spice or something like that. Pepper for sure, peppercorn for sure, combinations of red, white, and pink, and maybe even a little bit of those green peppercorns that you get and throw them in your steak Diane. As far as earth goes, I'm struggling here, maybe a little bit of potting soil or something like that, but definitely know what I would call minerality in this wine, and certainly coming off the last wine, which has sort of a stoniness to it, literally a stoniness to it. This wine doesn't share anything like that. In the palate, this wine has a nice bright acid to it, but it's clearly smooth, kind of like a Barry White song, right? It's got that ooh thing about it going through there. The tannins are present, but they're not gritty. They're present, but they're not astringent. They're definitely ample in style. The wine's got medium plus acid, I think. It's alcohol. My chest is burning up like a jack-o'-lantern, so I'm going to call that baby high. And it's extremely long and extremely expansive. I mean, it really goes out that way in the end. Very distinctive for what it is. And all of those sort of points that I talked on in the aromas are definitely there in the palate. So what could we be? Grenache blend creeps up on us again. Remember, I talked about sequencing earlier. Think about that. Syrah blend possibility as well too. Zinfandel again sort of has that richness and all of that, and the red and black fruits or some form of other. And then as far as your geographies go, in our European part of the world, you could certainly be Grenache blend for Spain. For France, you could be all of the above. Actually, there is Zinfandel in the Ardèche, so you could say that too. Australia, all of the above. California, all of the above. So think on this one. Go back, maybe taste the wine prior to that if you wanted to get a little bit of grounding on that, my sort of sequencing theory, and vote often. And I'm going to give you like 3, 2, 1. because I want to get to this wine, and I want Maddie to have some time because I know she wants to talk about her last wine. So what do we got here? We've got people sort of leaning between the Zinfandel and Syrah blend, a little bit of Grenache. I think the Grenache blend is probably a good call if you think about all the things that Tim talked about earlier, and also the depth of color is just simply not there. Grenache just is a more red thing, and its pigment missing. This is just too dark and too opaque. Syrah blend versus Zinfandel we can talk about. And as far as places go, most people are leaning towards the New World. A good 85% of you between California and Australia, probably driven as much by whether you thought it was a California take on a Rhone blend or whether you thought it was all and out Zinfandel. So we got some interesting calls there. Zinfandel has got that red black thing, that hen and chick, unripe, raisinated, etc. thing going on there. And it is actually that lack of raisination that usually sits somewhere there that probably would steer me away from Zinfandel. Even if it's just a kiss of it, you usually get some fruit that is raisinated and overripe to match out that other stuff there. Across the palate, where's that going to leave us? Probably going to take us on a plane, first of all, and we're going to leave our friends in Murcia and say goodbye to them and all that good cheese, that Murcia vino, that lovely goat cheese and all that stuff there. And we're going to get on a long flight. I don't know if we can do this one without a stopover or not, Tim, but we're going to find our way down to the Antipodes. And we, if you're collecting miles today, you're doing a really good job because we were in New Zealand, we left, and now we're coming back down here, but this time we are in Australia, and specifically in the Barossa area of Australia, the Barossa being broken up between the Barossa Valley and Eden Valley. And this wine itself comes from the venerable estate of Henschke in the Barossa Valley, although they make some pretty killer Eden Valley Riesling as well. But this is a wine of theirs that is sort of reflective of not only their terroir and the ripeness and deepness of fruit character, not only true of that sort of softly minty eucalyptal character that does predominate in a lot of the wines down there, but also eclectic of the thing. There's not one thing there, and in fact, this wine is not a pure Syrah or Shiraz, but rather a blend, and it's a blend with Grenache. It's a blend with a little bit of Mourvedre, thread. We talked about that before. So this is an SGM blend. It also has a little bit of Viognier in it. All of these are co-fermented together, and it's in a wine called Henry Seven. Henry Seven speaks to the 7 acres of the original property that were planted back by a gentleman named Henry Evans in 1853. His wife was a rash abolitionist, and when he died, she ripped out the vineyard and she destroyed the winery, but that land was reclaimed by the family of the Henschkes some time ago, and they were very happy, and this is their so-called tribute wine. The Henschkes have been in the business for 150 years. This is 6 generations of them, and this is just, for us who are used to their Riesling and their single plot Shirazes, people forget about this wine a lot. And it's not only by Henschke standards, Henschke is not an inexpensive wine, but by Henschke standards, it's not completely vertigo-inducing price-wise, and it's really reflective of their place and of their property. Prue does the vineyards, Steve does the winemaking. This is their family. They're sort of flanked on the right and left there, the young kids getting there. And this is a really just a delightful wine. This wine, as some of you might have remember, we did this about 15, 18 months ago, prior vintage, and it's backed by, I would say it's backed by Evan's demand. I wanted to put this wine back in. I think it shows really well, and is just, reflective of a great place by people who really know what they're doing and who truly sing about quality.
Did you see what Juan said? It's just great. Henschke wines are simply unreal. Quality for money is very hard to beat. And I love Henry Seven because it's expensive, but they're not out of my reach, and frankly,
Not Hill of Grace.
I would buy any damn thing they make. And Prue, by the way, she doesn't just, she hides in plain sight. She's like a top award-winning master viticulturalist who's really pushed the ceiling, but God, the quality of fruit on this is so beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, this is, Maddie and I have talked about Henschke before. We are huge fans. I think Stephen is one of the great red wine makers on the planet. One of the best tastings at a winery I've ever done was at Henschke. I will just say, that his tannin management on this wine is just, I don't know, it's flawless. It's just incredible. And Prue in the vineyard, and she works with vineyards 100 to 140 years old. is just, I mean, one of the top people. So,
Good stuff.
yep.
Limang, you're muted.
There are two questions, really. I think that with 43% of people picking Zinfandel, we do need to talk a
Address
little
that.
bit more about why not Zinfandel. The other thing is that what makes it Barossa Eden, Australian, because most people went for California.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked a little bit about the Zinfandel thing, but perhaps to reiterate it, Zinfandel you're going to find in general, almost across the board, some combination of unripe and ripe fruit in the same cluster, and that manifests itself in the wine. So you're going to have a wine that's got, when well made, bright acid, which this has, when well made, ripe fruit, which this has, but when well made, a kiss of raisination, which this definitely doesn't has. And if you go back to the wine prior and you're getting that sort of pruny raisin character, you're going to get that in a micro version, unless it's over the top in a Zinfandel, and you don't have that here. And as far as how Barossa, why that? There's certain signatures to the Barossa and to a good amount of Australian Shiraz-based wine, and that is that sort of minty eucalyptol character. You could find it in BV Private Reserve back in the day. You can find it in certain vineyards throughout Napa Valley, primarily in kind of the Rutherford Oakville area. It does a bit, although we're not sure of exactly why, seem to have a little bit of something to do with proximity to eucalyptus trees and mintiness. They've got studies that show that there's a eucalyptus grove nearby. The vineyards on the end are more eucalyptol as the oils and leaves and stuff fall into the vineyard and get that, although it's not a hard science. Some people also speculate on the coast that sometimes when you get like that pine and conifer character in Sonoma Coast wines, it's literally because the oils are picked up off of the wine and blown into the vineyard. So there's something there, but that's not it. But usually many of the most dominant areas for Shiraz in Australia and for Cabernet in Australia, from Barossa to Coonawarra, et cetera, all will have that. So that to me is a bit of a quote unquote giveaway.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right. Maddie.
I don't know what to do with more than 5 minutes. I'm just telling you, right? Okie dokie, I'll do my level best. Here we go. What questions did I put up here? I don't think I edited these, so let's see if the default is good. How would we characterize both the sweetness and the tannin on this wine? And I would define the sweetness as sweetness of fruit as opposed to actual RS. But I think qualifying and quantifying tannin is important. It isn't just how much of it is there, but is it aggressive? Is it mouth drying? Is it mean? Does it shut the flavor of the wine down? Or is it plentiful and just like the finest sandpaper? So hold that thought, especially helpful when it comes to initial and final conclusions. Important non-fruit aromas and flavors per Tim, wildly important. And is there a sense of inorganic minerality? And I would actually say in this particular wine, is there a sense of organic earthiness to it? Because, that is not necessarily a deal breaker between Europe and everybody else, because you can have plenty of New World wines that have a sense of digging in the garden, mulchy, forest floor-like. So, okie dokie, let's take a look at it. And we're on wine number 6, and just turn the glass. It is painting the glass. This is not from, as I think it was Evan or Tim who said earlier, this is not from Pinot Noir land. So we're not talking about thin-skinned varieties that include Gamay, Pinot, and Grenache. And keeping in mind that Grenache can often be blended with wines made from thick-skin grape varieties. So that can torque it. But this is grape variety or varieties that are thick-skinned and very extracted. The color is consistent from the, very dark ruby in the center. And if and one of my favorite things to do, I never get bored with this, just I move my eye slowly to the rim. I see lightening of color, but not change of hue. So this is telegraphing young wine to me. Though there are some little murderous grape varieties that have a yellow rim even when they're young, and this ain't one of them. So the rim just lightens to, I would say ruby violet. So whenever you get blue in a tone, it is reinforcing the youth of the wine. Aromatically, And by the way, I learned this trick from my dear friend TG, Tim Gaiser. Just turning the glass. You don't actually have to follow it with a whirl. It's enough that the wine is evaporating off the sides of the glass and you can smell it. Because often we get in this habit that we're going to beat the wine up, whirling it around, thinking we're going to get more fragrance from it. And quite often it just goes, nope. So aromatically wowie. It's not hiding a damn thing. It is jumping out of the glass with ripe berries and plums for me, both red and black. I'm not really sure which. Oh yeah, Serious Tears. I think Juan brought this up. So they're trudging. We've got extract and we've got alcohol, and these are going to take their sweet time getting down to the liquid. So that telegraphs both. So back to the aroma. Red and black fruit in equal measure to me, but definitely the berry and the plum zone, whether you want to define it as red and black currant, cassis, red and black raspberry, and perfectly ripe, virgin and overripe plums. It's a gorgeous, intensely fruity, not sweet, aromatic, ripe, moving into jamming, not quite confected, alcohol for sure. There's a florality to this wine. I love this, and I have you to thank, Evan, for learning to look for flowers thanks to, tasting Douro reds. The Tourigas tend to throw up a lot of florality, and so does, frankly, Malbec, but there is both ripe and dried, violets in this to me, maybe a little bit of lavender. It's really pretty. There is absolutely an earthiness to this wine that comes across like turned dirt, potting soil, and mushrooms. I'm not a gardener. I'm the one going out there going, hi, are there any weeds I can murder? So, I'm digging them up if my friends point to them and I don't kill the actual produce. So and I'm not kidding. Plants shudder when they see me coming, unless I wave at them. So not just turned dirt, but also a little bit of shrooms, mushroom, that type of thing. There is a green element to the nose that, it to me pushes forward is mint. Maybe a little eucalyptus, but more mint. And frankly, that coolness of mint can also be alcohol. I can not confuse those, but they go hand in hand. Is there pyrrhizine? I'm going to wait till I get it on my palate. There's green. I don't know if it's coming across as black as bell pepper, but I sure do get a licoricey character to this wine. That's really lovely, both red and black. So super ripe red and black fruit, an earthy character to it. Is there wood? Yes, but the wood spice is really integrated. I always call it the Starbucks smell, that, cocoa, coffee, vanilla, pumpkin, blah, 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 right? It's in there, but it's not dominant at all. It's beautifully integrated. And on the palate, it's delicious. It hits the palate with exactly what I was set up for on the nose. There's the alcohol. I feel it in my chest. But right on the heels of that is all that beautiful, super ripe red and black fruit. There is a little bit of a pyrrhizinic quality to this, but it's not strong and it's certainly not obnoxious. Mintiness, earthiness, tannins. Remember, we're quantifying and qualifying. So I rub my tongue against the roof of my mouth. I almost forgot to think about them because they're not dominant, but they are drying, absolutely. And I'm making myself pay attention to the acidity, which is just enough. So I would say moderate to moderate plus, and the tannins are running moderate plus, but relatively smooth. This wine is plush. It is, to me, exuberantly modern in character. I'm sorry to shove you into the new world, but if it's European, if it's somebody who is working with relatively young vines, and is a young person that is expressing that modernity in the wine. And what options do we have? Cabernet Sauvignon blend, Merlot blend. Very interesting because yes, they're both Bordelais, but no, they're not exact mirrors of each other, especially when you go back to the genesis of them in left bank Bordeaux and right bank Bordeaux. Loosely Cabernet Sauvignon, more dominant black fruit and harder tannins, and Merlot, moving into more red fruit with slightly less aggressive tannins. And don't forget Franc moves in there too. Sangiovese, you would have, to me, a balance between acidity and tannin, and you'd be picking up dried fruit character, which I don't think this has. And also probably even more earthiness in terms of like dust or dried earth, and a rockiness to it as well. What are our options? Italy for Sangiovese, and Merlot and Cabernet if we're talking the coast, right? France for Cabernet Merlot for sure. Argentina, ditto. California, ditto. Sangiovese is being planted successfully everywhere, but I think it's safe to say that its thumbprint is still Italy and still Tuscany, though it's a pretty successful world traveler. This is delicious wine, and by the way, the finish just went away. Always a mark of quality for me. It is mouth-watering, so I would say I might have been unkind on the acidity level. It's probably moderate plus, and maybe it's been adjusted, but successfully. This is a warm growing region. Cabernet Sauvignon blend leads with 63%. Merlot blend is on its heels strongly with almost 30%. Sangiovese has a hat tip with 8%. All y'all aren't doing other today. Is that because you're shy, or is it because the wines aren't just speaking to it? What?
Maddie, since Sangiovese only had 8%, would you say, Jerry has a question here, is the wine too deep in color for Sangiovese?
I think so. I think that's part of it. But I mean, again, the color, what does Tim say? I love it. When you're looking at the wine, you're not going to make up your mind there, but there's a part of you that's desperate to know what the wine is when you're tasting blind. But when you go back to the color, I just think it's too extracted. And also Sangiovese is one of those nasty little grapes. I mean, nasty with the heart around it, that tends to show a little yellow in the rim, even when it's young. And Nebbiolo does that too. It's the bane of blind tasting candidates, right? But I think more than anything, that ripeness just doesn't speak to, certainly Tuscan Sangiovese to me. And, the tannin structure would be different. Also, I think the acidity and the tannin would be more, equally matched. We're getting on our plane. Where are we going? This is indeed, I'm just going to go ahead. Yes, this is pretty right. I'm going to give you the baby. This is Napa Valley. The question is it, is it Cabernet? Is it Cabernet blend? Is it Merlot? What is it? This happens to be 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. And I'm looking at the stats, and I still think it comes across like it's a Cabernet with significant Merlot in it because of the amount of red fruit and also the quality of the tannins. It's not so foursquare. They're not lying, but I think they're probably, it's a reflection of younger vines and a winemaking style. This is Brendel. They are sourcing grapes dominantly from Rutherford, but also a little bit from Howell Mountain and some from St. Helena. This is a very interesting brand that is under the ownership of the Lawrence Wine Estates, which, if you do a little digging around on the internet and, and it'll take you all 5 seconds to look this guy up. The owner, Galen Lawrence, began with purchasing Heights and Burgess, correct?
Yep.
And
Stony Hill.
Yep, Stony Hill. So, but Brendel is something that I think was created by him and his CEO, Carlton McCoy, who is a friend and a master sommelier. And they are committed to presenting options to, frankly, younger generations of wine drinkers or potential wine drinkers. There's Carlton on the left. He always looks dapper. And Galen Lawrence is Galen Lawrence Jr. If you look up his family, they made their resources and everything. Lots of agriculture, not just wine, and banking and other industries as well. They're very interesting. They're very forthcoming about their business practices, but I'm going to let you read about it. They like simplicity and they don't like debt. There's the punchline. But at the end of the day, they are committed to presenting delicious wines that are moderately priced. This runs like 40 to 55, depending on where you buy it. And you consider 100% Napa Cabernet, that's a hell of a price point, correct?
Yeah.
And by the way, Cooper's Reed is drawn, that name, from the fact that this is aged in large vessels that are neutral sealed with reeds. I would bet money there's a little bit of small barrel in there, but I'm not going to say that they're lying to us. I think it's delicious and forthcoming, and does speak a combination of red and black fruit to me, but yummy. I'm done.
I love
Yay.
that Evan took us all around the world, but ended with Napa. That's very cool. I don't know if that was a surprise for anybody who was tasting this wine out there. Very cool to go around the world. I do want to keep on time because we have the happy half hour coming up. If you're able to stay with us, that would be fabulous. And thank you again for joining us today. It's fabulous to see everyone. Just to remind you, the next webinar with this around the world type of kit, 156A, is happening on July 19th, 2024. And it's at the same time, same channel, 1 p.m. And then Madeline has helped us pick some really amazing textbook wines, classics, if you will. During the summer, if you're a subscriber, we do pay for your shipping upgrade. So if you want to be a subscriber, I've been thinking about it, but haven't bite the bullet yet, well, this is the perfect time to do it, because we will pay for your shipping upgrade and your wines will get to you in pristine condition. Barbara, who works really hard behind the scenes, can attest to that. She runs our winery and puts a lot of effort making sure that things get to you in a very safe way. But if you aren't ready for a subscription, you can still buy the Around the World kits. But I should remind you that during the summer, we have very, very limited numbers. So go there. It will be updated in about 5 minutes, and you'll be able to put an order in for the 156A.
Welcome back, Li Meng. I want to say that.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to actually hop off the call, but Evan will be running, and he had promised you to explain a concept during the happy half hour. So Evan, I'm going to make you the host right now.
Great. Host away. Love it. Love it. Li Meng, ditto. Great to have you back with us. Look forward to more. And we're going to move into the happy half hour, which does two things. One, it makes me host. And two, we're going to allow you to come on screen. So if you'd like to join us, that allows you the opportunity to do that for the duration. So let me take the opportunity while people are gathering themselves and all of that to sort of give you my thinking. So the white wines were an interesting thing, and there was sort of your typicity about doing that, combinations of old. Again, I'm an old world guy, but we also Europe versus non-Europe thing. But interesting thing like that, and kind of moving around, keeping you on your toes. I wanted to let you know that rather than going this way, linear, sort of starting low and moving high from tannic structure, extraction, etc., I went backwards, right? So I started big and landed the plane, and the tannins went from sort of grittiest to in the middle to softest, and the style of wines moved around from sort of earthiest, harder, all the way around. So rather than going this way and leading up to a crescendo, bigger oak, bigger tannin, etc., I went the other way, and I did that to keep you focused, right? Because it's easy to lose attention when you move that. So that's where we are there. And with that, let's open it up for some questions and see where everybody is.